Before you even open your eyes tomorrow morning, an invisible war will already be raging inside your head, and you are currently losing it. You try to push the negative thoughts away, but they only slam back harder, exhausting your spirit before you've even had breakfast. In this opening chapter, we will discuss the loneliest war you'll ever wage, exploring why fighting your own mind is the most isolating conflict you will ever face, and how you can finally call a ceasefire. You know that exact feeling, that heavy, suffocating weight sitting squarely in your chest before your eyes even open to the morning light. It's the realization that you have to face another day with the same exhausting storm raging inside your head. Before you even throw off the covers, the thoughts are already racing at lightning speed. You aren't prepared for this. This project is going to fail. What if everything you've built suddenly falls apart? It's a brand new calendar day, but you fall into the exact same predictable reaction. You try to forcefully push those negative thoughts away, but they only slam back against your mind with double the force. You try to ignore the internal noise, but it only gets louder and more demanding. By the time you sit down for breakfast, you have already completely exhausted yourself through invisible resistance. Fear whispers its doubts, anger begins its slow burn, and anxiety wraps around your throat like a cold fist that refuses to loosen its grip. Here is the raw truth that society rarely admits out loud. Fighting against your own mind is the absolute loneliest war you will ever wage. To escape the pressure, you pick up your phone. You scroll through feeds, you search for distractions, you do anything to numb the persistent discomfort and silence the internal chatter. But the noise follows you wherever you go. It tracks you because it isn't originating from the external environment, it is coming from deep within you. You were never meant to live your life trapped like a prisoner inside your own skull, entirely dictated by passing emotions you didn't consciously choose, reacting frantically to every stimulus instead of intentionally responding, and merely surviving from day to day instead of genuinely living. But what if the fundamental problem isn't the presence of these negative thoughts themselves? What if the real issue is simply what you have been conditioned to do with them? What if you could stand face to face with your deepest fears without being paralyzed by them? What if you could meet intense frustration without being completely consumed by it, or sit quietly with anxiety without losing your sense of identity? You can do exactly that. This isn't abstract academic theory, this is practical psychological liberation. If you are truly ready to draw a line in the sand and begin this internal transformation today, make that commitment real to yourself right now. Let's begin. Look back at the last year of your life. How many hours of genuine joy did you completely surrender to an argument that only existed in your imagination? Most people spend decades trapped in this cycle, assuming emotional turbulence is just the price of admission for being human. In this chapter, we will discuss the high cost of the internal battle, examining exactly how much of your life, energy, and presence you are paying to sustain a conflict that yields no winners. Let's look at your life with complete honesty. How many actual hours, days, and years have you already surrendered to this relentless internal conflict? Think about how many meaningful conversations you completely missed out on because your physical body was in the room, but your mind was miles away, replaying a bitter argument from last week or endlessly rehearsing a future catastrophe that hasn't even happened yet. How many moments of genuine joy and peace have quietly slipped right past you because a small voice of anxiety convinced you that something terrible was right around the corner, waiting to drop? Think carefully about yesterday, last month, or 5 years ago. How much of your vital life energy did you burn up just trying to reach a baseline of feeling okay? How many bold decisions did you completely avoid making because fear stepped in and assured you that you would only fail? How much precious time have you spent feeling deeply resentful about events you cannot rewrite, people you cannot alter, and outcomes that were never yours to manage in the first place? The tragedy is that the vast majority of people spend their entire lives locked in this exact cycle. They live this way for decades and never once pause to question the system. They simply assume that this constant mental friction is the baseline human condition, that overthinking everything is normal, and that perpetual emotional instability is just the inevitable price of admission for being alive. But it doesn't have to be that way, and deep down in your core, you already recognize this truth. That is exactly why you are listening to these words right now. Something inside you is actively refusing to accept this exhausting mental chaos as your permanent reality. You have arrived at a vital crossroads. Perhaps it took a moment of complete burnout, utter exhaustion, or simply waking up one morning and realizing with absolute clarity that you can no longer survive while being at war with yourself. Whatever path brought you to this point, you have reached the most critical realization a human being can experience. This has to change right now. The cost of remaining unchanged is simply too high to bear. You are far too alive to live your life feeling this numb, and far too capable to spend your days feeling entirely powerless. That quiet voice inside you insisting that there must be a better way to exist is completely right. The beautiful reality is that you don't need to transform into a completely different person to find lasting peace. You don't need to desperately try to fix yourself because you aren't fundamentally broken. You don't need to completely eliminate every single negative thought from your consciousness because that is both impossible and unnecessary. What you actually need is a completely new way of relating to the thoughts and feelings that occur inside you. 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor and a chained slave discovered the exact same secret to absolute internal freedom, and it had nothing to do with changing their circumstances. They realized that while you cannot manage the world, your response belongs entirely to you. In this chapter, we will discuss the ancient blueprint for inner sovereignty, uncovering the foundational Stoic split between what is within your control and what is not. Let's look at your life with complete honesty. How many actual hours, days, and years have you already surrendered to this relentless internal conflict? Think about how many meaningful conversations you completely missed out on because your physical body was in the room, but your mind was miles away, replaying a bitter argument from last week or endlessly rehearsing a future catastrophe that hasn't even happened yet. How many moments of genuine joy and peace have quietly slipped right past you because a small voice of anxiety convinced you that something terrible was right around the corner, waiting to drop? Think carefully about yesterday, last month, or 5 years ago. How much of your vital life energy did you burn up just trying to reach a baseline of feeling okay? How many bold decisions did you completely avoid making because fear stepped in and assured you that you would only fail? How much precious time have you spent feeling deeply resentful about events you cannot rewrite, people you cannot alter, and outcomes that were never yours to manage in the first place? The tragedy is that the vast majority of people spend their entire lives locked in this exact cycle. They live this way for decades and never once pause to question the system. They simply assume that this constant mental friction is the baseline human condition, that overthinking everything is normal, and that perpetual emotional instability is just the inevitable price of admission for being alive. But it doesn't have to be that way, and deep down in your core, you already recognize this truth. That is exactly why you are listening to these words right now. Something inside you is actively refusing to accept this exhausting mental chaos as your permanent reality. You have arrived at a vital crossroads. Perhaps it took a moment of complete burnout, utter exhaustion, or simply waking up one morning and realizing with absolute clarity that you can no longer survive while being at war with yourself. Whatever path brought you to this point, you have reached the most critical realization a human being can experience. This has to change right now. The cost of remaining unchanged is simply too high to bear. You are far too alive to live your life feeling this numb, and far too capable to spend your days feeling entirely powerless. That quiet voice inside you insisting that there must be a better way to exist is completely right. The beautiful reality is that you don't need to transform into a completely different person to find lasting peace. You don't need to desperately try to fix yourself because you aren't fundamentally broken. You don't need to completely eliminate every single negative thought from your consciousness because that is both impossible and unnecessary. What you actually need is a completely new way of relating to the thoughts and feelings that occur inside you. Your brain is currently treating a passive-aggressive work email with the exact same life-or-death panic as a predator hunting you in the wild. Your feelings aren't flawed. They are just running ancient biological software in a modern environment. In this chapter, We will discuss understanding the true nature of your emotions, shifting your perspective from being a victim of your feelings to a conscious observer of their messages. Before you can effectively master your emotional states, you have to accurately understand what they actually are. Intense fear, burning anger, and paralyzing anxiety are not your inherent enemies. They are simply survival messengers. They are your biological brain's primitive way of trying to keep you safe from harm. Fear flashes a warning light saying, "There is a potential hazard ahead. Prepare your defenses." Anger signals an alert saying, "An important personal boundary has been crossed. Protect what you value." Anxiety creates tension saying, "The immediate environment feels unpredictable. Remain highly alert." In the proper context, these emotional reactions are incredibly useful tools. If a vehicle is suddenly hurtling directly toward you, a flash of fear moves your body out of harm's way before you can even think. If someone threatens the safety of your family, anger immediately mobilizes your energy to protect them. If you have a high-stakes professional deadline looming, a controlled amount of anxiety ensures you stay focused on finishing the work. The real crisis isn't that you experience these natural human emotions. The crisis is that your biological hardware is running outdated survival software. Your nervous system was masterfully designed for a prehistoric world where threats were immediate, physical, and fleeting, a predator hidden in the brush, a rival faction on the horizon, or a steep drop-off in the dark. In those critical moments, a sudden surge of fear or adrenaline was the exact mechanism that kept you alive. But today, your primitive brain treats a sharp corporate email from your supervisor with the exact same life-or-death intensity as a physical predator. It reacts to minor instances of social rejection or an awkward public interaction as if your literal survival is at stake. It completely floods your physical body with destructive stress hormones because you are worried about a hypothetical financial event that might occur next quarter. Your emotions are trying to do their biological job, but they are doing it in a complex modern environment they were never originally built to handle. This is exactly where the Stoics offer a definitive lifeline. Seneca famously observed that we suffer far more frequently in the theater of our own imagination than we ever do in objective reality. Think deeply about that. The vast majority of your fear isn't actually about what is happening in this exact room right now. It's about what might happen tomorrow. The majority of your anger isn't caused by the present moment itself. It is generated by the elaborate, unfair story you are telling yourself about the present moment. The majority of your anxiety isn't tied to an active physical danger. It is rooted entirely in your discomfort with future uncertainty. You aren't actually struggling against objective reality. You are struggling against your subjective thoughts about reality. That realization changes the entire game. Because while you cannot control whether someone treats you rudely, you hold absolute authority over whether you allow their rudeness to define your personal worth. You cannot control whether an economic downturn affects your employment, but you retain full control over whether you view that transition as the tragic end of your story or the unexpected beginning of an entirely new chapter. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this daily. If you are distressed by an external circumstance, the resulting pain isn't caused by the event itself, but entirely by your own evaluation of it. And your evaluation is something you have the power to revoke at any single moment. Your interpretation, your internal narrative, the story you tell yourself, that is where the real battle takes place. It doesn't happen out there in the world, it happens between your ears. So when fear arrives at your door, you don't have to blindly obey its commands. You can simply acknowledge its presence, thank your biology for trying to keep you safe, and rationally analyze whether it's providing objective data or just running outdated evolutionary programming. When anger flares up, you don't have to let it consume your actions. You can implement a deliberate pause, inspect the exact boundary trigger, and choose a dignified response that serves your long-term character rather than an outburst that damages your life. When anxiety grips your chest, you don't have to believe the catastrophic stories it weaves. You can take a deep breath, anchor your awareness in the immediate room, and ground yourself in what is objectively true right now. This is the shift from being entirely controlled by your emotions to becoming fully aware of them. And that awareness is exactly where your personal freedom resides. Fear demands that you live in the dark. The moment you force it to answer a single rational question, it completely loses its power to paralyze you. When anger arrives, it demands immediacy, relying on a flash flood of impulse to override your judgment. In this chapter, we will discuss the tactical manual, Dismantling Fear and Anger, exploring the exact tools of worst-case visualization and the vital strategy of the pause. Now that we understand the core philosophy, let's look at the exact psychological tactics you can deploy when fear, anger, or anxiety show up in your life. Because understanding a principle intellectually is one thing, executing it under pressure is where character is forged. Let's begin with fear. Fear demands a future orientation. It cannot survive without the phrase, "What if? What if I completely embarrass myself? What if they reject my proposal? What if my financial security vanishes?" To neutralize this, the Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. This isn't about spiraling into helpless catastrophic thinking. It is the exact opposite. It is the practice of looking your absolute worst-case scenario directly in the eyes with absolute clarity and asking yourself, if this specific disaster occurred, what practical steps would I take to navigate it? Could my character survive the experience? In almost every single scenario, the honest answer is an unshakable yes. Seneca famously advised his wealthy peers to spend a few days every month voluntarily living on the simplest food, wearing rough clothes, and sleeping on hard surfaces, while asking themselves, "Is this the condition that I was so terrified of losing my peace over?" He did this to strip the terror away from the unknown. You can apply a modern version of this tool. If you are terrified of losing your current position, vividly imagine it happening. What would you actually do the next morning? You would wake up, update your professional profiles, reach out to your network, adjust your budget, and perhaps pivot into an industry you've been ignoring. It would be highly challenging, yes, but would it completely destroy your existence? No. If you are terrified of interpersonal rejection, imagine hearing the word no. It stings for a moment, you feel the initial disappointment, and then what happens? The sun still rises, you step forward, and you realize that one person's opinion has zero power to alter your intrinsic value. When you proactively rehearse difficulties in your mind with a spirit of calm preparation, they lose their ability to paralyze you. Fear thrives exclusively in the dark. Shine the light of rational analysis on it, and it immediately shrinks. Now let's address anger. Anger is an emotional flash flood. If you choose to act or speak while the floodwaters are raging, you will almost guaranteed make the situation significantly worse. Marcus Aurelius wrote a brilliant reminder on this. How much more damaging are the long-term consequences of our anger than the initial causes that triggered it? The path of destruction you leave behind when reacting in a rage is always vastly worse than whatever minor slight or inconvenience made you angry in the first place. The definitive Stoic strategy for anger is incredibly simple, yet requires immense discipline. The pause, that is it, just pause. The moment you feel that familiar heat rising in your chest, the moment you feel the urgent impulse to lash out, to defend your pride, or to attack someone else, force your body to completely stop. Do not speak a single word. Do not type a single character. Take a slow, measured breath. Count to 10 if necessary. Step away from the physical environment. Leave the email in your drafts folder until the next morning. Create an intentional pocket of space between the external trigger and your internal response. Anger relies entirely on immediate momentum. It peaks rapidly and then naturally begins to fade. If you can simply outlast that initial wave for even a few minutes, your rational mind will come back online, allowing you to see the situation with absolute clarity. Remember, it isn't the driver cutting you off that causes your rage. It is your immediate judgment that says, "This person is intentionally disrespecting me." What if you consciously chose a completely different interpretation? What if they are distracted by a family emergency? What if they simply made an honest mistake? What if it is a trivial event that you will completely forget about in less than an hour? You hold the power to choose your judgment. Every single time you execute the pause, instead of reacting on autopilot, you are building the muscle of self-mastery. You are proving that you are a free individual, not a slave to passing impulses. Anxiety is nothing more than fear spread thin across a timeline that doesn't exist, demanding that you solve problems that haven't even happened yet. It loops endlessly in your mind, pretending to be preparation while draining your reality. In this chapter, we will discuss dissolving anxiety by anchoring in the now, learning how to ground your physical senses and step out of imaginary time travel. Anxiety is an incredibly deceptive emotion because it frequently disguises itself as useful preparation. It whispers to your mind, "I'm just trying to keep you safe. I'm helping you map out every potential disaster so you can be ready." But in reality, anxiety isn't preparation at all. Anxiety is simply fear spread incredibly thin across an imaginary timeline. The ultimate antidote to anxiety is an unconditional return to the present moment. Ask yourself right now, in this exact millisecond, are you physically okay right this second? Are you breathing? Are you safe in this room? Is there a literal physical emergency occurring right now? In almost every instance, the objective answer is a resounding no. Anxiety lives exclusively in the psychological gap between where your body is right now and where your mind imagines the future to be. It desperately demands that you solve complex problems that do not exist yet, and many that will never manifest in physical reality. Marcus Aurelius wrote a powerful instruction to his mind: do not let the future trouble you. You will meet it, if you must, with the exact same weapons of reason that currently arm you against the present moment. He recognized that trying to manage tomorrow using today's limited energy is an exercise in futility. You cannot fix a future that isn't here yet. All you can ever do is show up with absolute focus for the immediate moment before you, trusting that your capacity to adapt will be there when the future arrives. When you feel the icy grip of anxiety starting to tighten around your thoughts, immediately ground your physical body. Feel the solid weight of your feet planted firmly on the floor. Look around the room and consciously name 5 distinct things you can see. Listen closely to the subtle ambient sounds around you. Take 3 slow, deliberate breaths deep into your diaphragm. By doing this, you aren't ignoring your future responsibilities. You are simply refusing to allow a hypothetical tomorrow to steal the only real territory you actually possess. Today, this is where your true power resides, not in controlling the shifting tides of tomorrow, but in choosing exactly how you command yourself right now. These psychological practices, facing down fear through deliberate preparation, transforming your anger through the power of the pause, and dissolving anxiety by anchoring your awareness in the present, are not magical quick fixes. They are rigorous mental skills, and just like any physical skill in the gym, they grow stronger only through consistent, daily repetition. The Stoics never promised an easy life entirely devoid of negative emotions. They promised an unshakable life where those emotions no longer run the show. And that distinction changes everything. There is a precise moment in the middle of chaos where you will suddenly realize you aren't actually trapped in the storm, you are the sky holding it. This shift in perspective is the ultimate reward of a consistent mindfulness practice. In this chapter, we will discuss the view from the sky, radical internal freedom, unpacking what happens when you create an intentional clearing between an external event and your interior soul. So what actually shifts in your daily experience when you commit to living this way? The answer is both everything and nothing. Your external circumstances might remain exactly the same as they are right now. The difficult, unpredictable people in your life will likely still be difficult. The uncertain future of the economy will still be uncertain. Your daily professional challenges won't magically vanish into thin air, but the crucial difference is that you are no longer the same. You completely stop waiting for the external world to give you permission to feel at peace. You stop requiring every circumstance to be perfectly aligned before you allow yourself to be steady. You abandon the exhausting belief that your personal happiness depends entirely on managing variables that were never yours to command. You realize with absolute certainty that true freedom is never about changing your external reality. It is about radically changing your internal relationship to it. There is a distinct moment, and you will recognize it with absolute clarity when it happens, where you will find yourself right in the middle of a stressful situation that used to completely destroy your day, and you will suddenly notice something completely unexpected: space. You will notice a calm, spacious gap between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. A gap between the negative thought that pops into your head and your decision to actually believe it. A gap between the raw physical feeling in your body and the action you take next. And inside that sacred space is exactly where your true life begins. You are no longer driven by raw impulse, no longer enslaved by emotional fluctuations, and no longer tossed around like a leaf by every minor shift in your external environment. You become steady, grounded, and fully awake. You will begin to notice that the old thoughts still arrive at the shoreline of your mind. Fear will still try to whisper its doubts, anger will still flash its brief heat, and anxiety will still attempt to drag your awareness into a chaotic tomorrow. But now, you finally see them for what they truly are, just temporary weather patterns passing across a vast sky. You don't have to waste your energy fighting the storm. You don't have to frantically try to stop the rain from falling. You simply have to remember that you are not the storm. You are the unshakable sky that holds it all. The ancient Stoics had a specific term for this state of mind: apatheia. It doesn't mean modern apathy or cold numbness. It means radical freedom from being dominated by destructive internal passions. It isn't that you stop feeling the rich spectrum of human emotion. It is that you completely stop being a victim of what you feel. You become the conscious observer of your inner world, not its helpless prisoner. And from that vantage point of clarity, you can finally respond to the challenges of life with profound wisdom instead of panicked reaction, with absolute stillness instead of external chaos, and with unshakable strength instead of immediate surrender. The prison you've been fighting so hard to escape was never made of steel or brick. It was built entirely out of the thoughts you chose to believe. The keys to the gate have been in your possession all along. In this final chapter, we will discuss closing, reclaiming your inner kingdom, reminding you that your mind is your only sovereign domain, and outlining how to protect it every single day. Where do you go from this moment forward? The answer is simple: you practice. You practice every single day with every ordinary interaction. Tomorrow morning, life will present you with countless fresh opportunities to deploy what you have learned. Someone will cut you off, break a promise, or act completely unreasonably, and right there is your arena to practice the pause before you react. An unexpected hurdle or uncertainty will loom in your schedule, and right there is your opportunity to stay anchored in the present moment instead of catastrophizing. A critical thought will whisper that you aren't capable enough, and right there is your chance to question its validity instead of accepting it as an absolute fact. This isn't a one-time intellectual transformation, it is a relentless daily commitment. The Stoics understood this reality deeply. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his reflections a single time and consider his mind mastered. He opened his journal every single morning of his life to remind his soul of who he wanted to be and exactly how he intended to show up for his duties. You will inevitably forget these principles at times. You will react on impulse, you will get swept up in a wave of emotion, and you will stumble. That is an unalterable part of being a human being, but each single time you notice your stumble, each time you implement the pause, and each time you consciously choose awareness over autopilot, you are actively carving out the resilient life you actually want to possess. Epictetus famously shared a beautiful metaphor with his students: no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a cluster of figs. If you tell me that you desire a fig, I answer you that there must be time. Let it first blossom, then bear its fruit, and then finally ripen. You are in the process of ripening, and every single time you choose presence over panic, courage over avoidance, and wisdom over blind reaction, you are proving to yourself that you are not trapped. You never actually were. The prison was only ever an illusion constructed by your own mind, and the key to the kingdom, you have held it in your hands all along. So stop wagging a lonely war against yourself. Stop resisting the natural rise of your feelings, and stop believing the lie that your thoughts are absolute facts. Start observing, start choosing, Start living as the undisputed sovereign of your own inner kingdom, because that is exactly who you are. The fear, the anger, and the anxiety do not own your life, you own your mind. Now step forward and live like it. If you are completely finished letting fear, frustration, and anxiety dictate your reality, claim your sovereignty right now. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and join our community of practice. This is just the very beginning of your transformation into someone absolutely nothing can shake. Thank you for standing steady with us today.